there's no going
So you
back.
can do what you wanna do. You already know. You can do what you wanna do. From Dalene to
Hello artists, and welcome to day 26. This is Dalene FM, and we're busy going through the principles of art, starting today with balance. When we get to a later lesson on composition, all of the principles that we're going to be going through over the next couple of days will come into play, and we'll discuss them in more context. So for the moment they may seem a little bit out of context, but bear with me, we will eventually get to a place where they all come together in composition. Okay, so balance. When we talk about balance, we're talking about the visual weight of an item, not necessarily its physical, what it would actually weigh if you weighed it. We're going to talk about what is commonly known as the Fulcrum Method or the Fulcrum system. Now, a fulcrum, as you might know, is a balance beam on a pivotal point. If you thought of the visual area of your painting being the balance beam here, and how you would arrange your items in your painting to create balance. Now, what I want you to understand is that good balance is not necessarily good composition. Bad balance can also be good composition. So that's one of the things that we're going to discuss a little bit later, just after we've been through these first few steps. Of course, the most obvious balance would be to place two equal sized objects would have the same visual weight on either side of your fulcrum balance beam here. When we start playing with two different sized objects, then we start placing them differently. In the case of a large object being on the balance beam with a smaller object, then we need to bring the large object further in so that it looks more visually balanced, because if you can imagine that being your pivot point, your smaller object would have to be at the end, your larger object closer to the middle for this to be able to balance well. Here we've got the red and the blue items. Visually they look like they would weigh a similar amount. And then here, of course, we can do the same thing with a number of objects, with the cube on the one side and the number of smaller items on the other side. The total weight of those items would balance out the single weight of the cube. So there again, we've got our balance beam pivoting on a fulcrum, and we can see that roughly speaking we're looking at about the same kinds of weight. All these methods here are to create even weight in your painting. What we're looking at here is literally just a side view of weight, and your painting doesn't have to be weighted sideways, left to right. You know, if you think of this being the size of your painting, it looks like a face. You don't have to weigh your painting equally left and right. You can also weigh your painting backwards and front, foreground to background, at a bit of an obtuse angle here, where you've got a larger object in the front and a smaller object slightly to the distance. The reason it's smaller is because there's perspective involved. So that object, if it was in the same plane as the object in the front, would be a similar size, but because it's further back and there's perspective involved, it appears smaller. So consciously you're aware of the fact that these are two similar sized objects placed on either ends of a seesaw over a fulcrum point. So even though you're looking at it at an angle, it's still visually creating balance. And the same here goes for this one, where there's your fulcrum point, that's your pivot point there, and your item in the front and your item in the back are two different sizes, but you're getting the visual effect of two items well balanced, because the one on the far end is in perspective, so it appears visually smaller, but it is in fact, if this was in real life, it would be in fact a similar size. So that is balance in a nutshell. Now let's go and have a look at how some really well-known paintings deal with this. Now on the left here we have a Monet. Now remember, I was saying just now that balance doesn't necessarily have to be well balanced to be good balance in a painting. If you have a look at this, where would our fulcrum be here? Because we've got a heavy weight on this side of the seesaw and a very light weight. I'll just indicate it by a little dotted line. So a fulcrum would have to be somewhere over there for this to be well weighed, to be well weighted, to be well balanced. But it is in fact not. We've got quite a lot of balance issues going on here, so to speak, and that's actually a good thing that we don't have good balance. You know, some paintings make use of an unbalanced composition really well, and this is one of them. It's very weighted to the left hand side, and yet it doesn't look as if the buildings are going to fall off the painting at all. It looks well balanced in an uneven balanced kind of way, because you've got this beautiful yellows and blues that are increased in intensity on this side that seems to balance it out quite nicely. Here we have another painting where we're making use of a balance beam that's in perspective, so our fulcrum would be sitting here somewhere, and we've got an item there and a little group of items there. Now this one is theoretically really badly balanced, because what's happening is we've got one large and one small person on the one end of the balance beam, and we've got one small person on the other end of the balance beam. Now they clearly are not going to be well suited on either side of the seesaw. This lady with the little boy is going to be much heavier, and then in addition to that, she's got two additional characters here with her. So this left hand side of the painting is extremely weighted, whereas the right hand side of the painting, that is a fulcrum sitting over there, this little person is not going to be anywhere near the same kind of weight as the little group of people on the left hand side. But the way that the artist actually counteracts this very well is with this area here of empty space, because that area of empty space is lightening up the left hand side of the weight of the painting. So all your emphasis is on the left hand side, all your weight is on the left hand side, but you've got an area here of lightness that is lightening it up, that seems to almost counteract the balance. You've also got an area here that adds to the weight of the right hand side, and you've got this color at the bottom here that's showing in the reflection that adds to the weight of the right hand side. So here we've got another example of how a badly weighted painting can actually be done on purpose and be used very well. The unevenness of this particular composition is exceptionally beautiful. Here we've got a little painting that's beautifully weighted. If we look at that being our fulcrum, like so, that's the pivot point there. We've got a lady on the front, and we've got a tree at the back. So we've got this perfectly vertical fulcrum system going on here, and it's really well weighted with the largeness of the tree in the background and the fullness of the lady and the child in the foreground. So that's a well balanced painting, and it works really well. Of course, here's my favorite Starry Night. This is a Van Gogh painting. Again, we've got one of these diagonals where we've got the cypress tree and the sun, and that is creating a really well balanced painting. This one here, also a Van Gogh, is if we had to guess where the fulcrum point is, I would say it's probably about there. That's the balance point, because we're also looking at one of these weighted situations here where we've got the house and all this foreground detail here, but we've also got a tree that sort of seems to act as a bit of a fulcrum point in itself, and adds weight slap bang in the middle of our pivot point. So again, well balanced, but not boring. You know, if we look at these compositions up at the top here, if we had to weight our paintings, generally speaking, just left to right, they would be really boring, whereas these artists have creatively used weight. This is a left to right composition. This one here is a left to right composition, but then it's been unevenly weighted. So he's added the excitement of the uneven weighting here. This one is weighted in perspective as well as being unevenly weighted, which is lovely. So, and then here we've got an interesting one. This it's a beautiful little painting. We've got our weight is slap bang in the middle, right over our fulcrum. So this is nothing. This is not a situation where we've got a left and a right object that is actually creating the balance. It's one single object pushing down on one single point. This little one here, we've got a lot of weight on the right hand side. We've got a lot of weight on the left hand side. This is our fulcrum point here. But notice how the weighting on the left hand side is quite full in color. The weighting on the weighting on the right hand side is quite full in color. The weighting on the left hand side is more sparse. There's lots of negative space going on here. So although this weighting on the left hand side is bigger, it's more sparse. So you get this sort of general feel that the density of the weight on this left hand side would be very similar to the density of the weight on the right hand side, because it's bigger but it's more sparse. So, artists, that in a nutshell is balance. We will go into balance in more context when we start talking about composition, because when we talk about composition, we'll take all the principles into account and put them all together into composition. So I hope you enjoyed this very quick little discussion on balance. And again, I ask you please to share and like and send it around the internet. Invite your friends to join in on this epic journey of ours. And I will see you tomorrow with contrast. Bye.
That's what you want to do.